Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages, to give perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We hope to add a new episode most Fridays at 9 a.m. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes. As a supporter, you will get a direct email link to Mike. In Season 5, we are making significant improvements and changes on an ongoing basis.
Now you can help me afford to keep making this podcast by becoming a supporter. First, a quick note about the podcast. It's available because I absolutely love doing it, despite the fact that it costs me probably more time than I can actually afford. Now, I can't buy back my time, but there is one thing that you can do that would be really helpful, and that is help me to afford making this podcast. You can do that by going to the website, openforuminthevillages.com, and clicking on the supporter box and making a small donation of $3 to $10 a month, and you can cancel at any time. Really, a small donation of $3 will still make a difference, and I'd really appreciate it. If you can't afford to do that, I completely understand. It's economically tough times for a lot of people, but there is something that you can do for free that can really help. If you want to, you can rate the podcast. You can give it 5 stars, or maybe even give it a review on whatever podcast application you're using. That will make a huge difference because we will be discovered by more people. If you're able to do that, we would massively appreciate it, and it would help keep this podcast going in 2024.
If you have a book that you would like to turn into an audiobook, let us know via email to mike@rothvoice.com. Hope you enjoy today's show.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Wayne Richard. Thanks for joining me, Wayne.
Thank you.
We're going to do a little backwoods interview show where Wayne is going to interview me.
We're going to turn the tables. So let's, what do you say we begin at the very start?
At the very start.
At the very start. Okay. First, the earth cooled.
Yes.
And then the dinosaurs came.
Right. Then Fred Flintstone came.
And then you were born.
Right.
You were born where?
In Brooklyn, New York.
In Brooklyn, New York.
Dirty, you know.
Really? What was your... No, don't give your address. What was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
Well, actually, my earliest memories are probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, living in Far Rockaway, New York, on a street called Gibson Street. My mom bought me a...
Was that right next to vodka?
I don't know.
Okay.
That was a long time ago. Anyway, my birthday was coming up, probably my 3rd or 4th birthday. I don't remember which one. And she bought me a Hopalong Cassidy black outfit, black shirt, black
Easy
pants,
for you to say.
Black boots,
Yeah.
black hat.
Wow.
And a cap pistol. That was the theme of the party.
So you were going gangster even back then?
Oh, yeah. Cowboy, not
Oh,
gang.
cowboy. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's Brooklyn. You know,
No, that was Long Island.
Long Island.
Brooklyn is on Long Island, and Far Rockaway is part of Queens.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we moved to Miami, where I went to kindergarten. And
now, why does one move to Miami?
I don't know. My parents moved to Miami, so I went with them.
And what did your parents do? What was...
Oh, that's a good question. My dad was a designer of leather goods, primarily ladies' handbags, pocketbooks, and purses.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with his brother. They had a business, Max Roth Incorporated.
Sounds official to me.
Oh, yeah. It was in the Soho district of Manhattan. And many times as I was growing up on a Saturday morning, Dad would take me and my brother. I don't know if my brother came with me. I can't remember. I don't think so. He was 3 years younger. So we went to the factory in Soho.
Okay. Now, what about brothers and sisters? Do you have any?
Yeah, I have one full brother, okay, and I have a half-sister and a half-brother.
And what was it like growing up with them? Did you get along?
Oh, yeah. We got along.
There wasn't any tension or knife fights or anything like that?
Oh, no knife fights.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Might have been pillow fights.
Pillow fights. Okay. What about your education?
That's a good question. I went to high school in Brooklyn, New York at Samuel J. Tilden. I played in the band from the time I was in junior high school. I played trombone.
That's a hard instrument to play.
Oh, yeah. You have to learn the positions. There were 7 positions.
7 positions.
Yeah, otherwise you'd be out of tune. And then you had to tune the thing with the tuning coil at the back. I guess what's it called, the coil, I don't remember. And
I had a lot of problems with the piano when I started piano. I was blowing into it. So I don't think that's the way it's supposed to work.
Unless it was a player piano and you were acting as the bellows.
No, I never had a player piano. I was the only player on the piano.
Oh, okay. My grandmother had a player piano. Sorry. And as much as the grandkids tried, we couldn't get it to play.
Now, let me ask you this. When did you start beginning to develop your dulcet, deep tones?
Probably someplace in high school. When given a choice in high school of either taking a speaking part in a play, because I was in the drama club and they put on plays, or running the spotlights and lighting board, I chose the lighting board and spotlights.
Really?
Absolutely. I didn't like being on downstage center and talking to the audience.
Now that's really interesting in light of what you do now, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Right, but I started out, I had stage fright.
Now, what about radio? Did you ever gravitate towards radio?
Yes.
How did that happen?
When I was in college, I applied to the City College of New York radio station to be on the radio as a DJ or whatever, announcer, and they rejected my application. They said I didn't speak right. I couldn't say the word cigarettes correctly.
Well, you just said it.
I did, but that's after $4,000 worth of speech training.
So you learned after a great investment how to enunciate.
How to enunciate and say words in a neutral American speech pattern, which is something that one has to practice.
So in other words, you don't say things like y'all.
It depends on where you are. I had the great, I'm going to call it a gift of being able to mimic speech patterns that I hear enough. Mm-hmm. So if you all want to hear a Southern accent, I can suddenly switch into a Southern accent because I spent a lot of time in the South as I was working. There were about 4 years where I lived on a...
Yeah, but the funny thing is I can do this. I've never been to India.
Never been to India?
Never been to India.
Oh, I don't say I can do that.
I do it all the time. I see all kinds of computers in here. Could I fix one of them for you, please? Anyway.
Sure, I'll find the one that doesn't work. So I got nothing to lose.
Did any of your theatrical endeavors way back then involve improv?
Well, I don't think so. I don't know if, in the 60s or there was much improv going around. Elaine May and Mike Nichols were the people that you listened to on records and LPs, and they were the first improv artists that I'm aware of. When I ran through a lot of jobs and was very successful in the Fortune 1000, selling computers and phone systems. And
so you got involved with all of that as the electronic computer revolution began.
Right. I was an electrical engineering student in City College for 2 years, and after 2 years decided that electrical engineering wasn't for me, and I switched into the business school and graduated with a management and marketing degree, and then went on to some graduate school there at the Baruch College. But the only course that I ever dropped in college was a computer course. I guess it was some Fortran programming, and the first thing you had to learn is how to operate an IBM 029 key punch. And so I go to the first class, and there's this big machine that's punching holes in cards, and you type in strange stuff, and I had no understanding of how it worked. And so I said, before I fail the course, I'm going to drop it. And that's what I did. And so out of college, I worked for Mayor Lindsay for about 2 years, learned to hate politicians in general, And
that was probably a great moment for you.
Yes.
To learn to stay away from that stuff.
As a young man, what drove me crazy about the politicians was every place that I went, because I was working in Lindsay's office and Deputy Mayor Costello's office, everybody wore stage makeup all the time.
Including Abbott and Costello. Right.
Yeah, well, Abbott and Costello.
That's a totally different thing.
Right. Who's on first? What's on second, Lindsay was a strange guy. When I was in college, after I got out of college, working for Lindsay, somehow I wound up with a radio show on, I think it was Thursday nights on WNYC, and I would interview Mayor Lindsay. And the piece de gras of me deciding I got to get out of a job that's related to politics.
That's delicious if it's prepared right, by the way. Piece de gras, man, it's really good.
Okay. I've never had it.
It's wonderful.
Anyway, so Lindsay and I finishes this radio show at about 9:30 on a Thursday night. It's a cold winter night. We walk out of the station. I'm wearing a coat, and Lindsay pulls his hat down over his forehead and turns up the collar of his winter coat, long winter coat. And we're walking towards the subway. And I said, Mayor Lindsay, why did you turn up your collar and pull down your hat? It's not that cold. And he says, Mike, I don't want anyone to recognize me. Now, someplace, if I looked around in the attic here, I might even have a 9-minute tape of one of those shows that I did with Mayor Lindsay. But after I left the political job, I went to work for the Burroughs Corporation, selling adding machines and calculators door to door in Manhattan. And they had a manual crank backup just in case the electricity went out.
Really?
Yeah.
So people are desperate in case the power goes out and they have the need to count. They have that backup there.
They had that crank backup.
Oh,
yes. And every once in a while I would get funny with them, and I'd bring a small Chinese abacus along with me and say, in the event that you can't pull the crank, here's a little abacus, you can do it with your finger.
Boy, that's a desperation, I'll tell you.
Sold a lot of machines, so I got promoted into their computer division.
Okay.
Sold small accounting computers, what I would call the first desktop computer, their Series L2000s, and it was very successful. But I was working 5 days a week trying to sell and install these computers, and another day to learn more, and I just couldn't finish working at night, going to school at night. So I stopped the master's degree, and then I got offered a job working for a company called Telex. No, it was Action Communications. And let me think about that. It was Telex first. Telex computer
Okay, now
products.
while he tries to figure out who he is and what he did in the past, maybe we should take a break and get that spot in.
For Dr. Craig Curtis.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Curtis, what do you think the future looks like, Alzheimer's treatment here in America?
I think the future looks very good. I think that these blood tests are going to make a significant difference in our ability to detect someone who's developing Alzheimer's disease before symptoms. A person who develops memory loss due to Alzheimer's disease, we know that that disease actually started approximately 2 decades or 20 years prior. We know that amyloid starts building up for approximately 20 years, 15 to 20 years, which then initiates other brain cells to die off, essentially, which leads to Alzheimer's disease. So we're trying to remove that amyloid prior to that so we can prevent Alzheimer's disease. And we're also attempting to, once somebody already has the cognitive changes or memory symptoms, we're trying to figure out if reducing that amyloid really slows the disease. We now have, of course, the world's first medicine on the market that is slowing Alzheimer's disease by removing amyloid from the brain. And we're looking at newer, more advanced forms of those medications that remove the amyloid much more quickly in a matter of months. So that's very exciting.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the village's community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Okay, so.
Have you figured out who you are now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
I'm Genghis Khan.
Oh. Another great Chinese restaurant, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, Genghis Khan is going to be opening his first restaurant here in the Villages in about 6 months. But at Telex, I learned that I could work 5 days a week and make twice as much money than I did at Burroughs. I really liked that. I took a territory, which was only Long Island where I lived. It was great. We went to a great meeting in California, and that was when IBM and Telex got involved in an antitrust lawsuit. The president of Telex settled the suit, and all of a sudden, of the 120 salespeople that they had, they were down to 20, and I was one of the 20. And so I had a territory that went from Boston down to Washington, D.C., west to Pittsburgh. And all of a sudden, I had the beginnings of living on an airplane. I remember the first day on that job, I go into the VP's office. I had a skin graft on my thumb because a car fell on me. And he looks at me and says, Mike, I need to give you 3 things. He counts out $400 bills. That's cash. It's spending money. I said, good. Then he gives me an air travel card. I said, that was good. And then he gives me a Diners Club card. And he puts the Diners Club card down on the desk, and I took it. I said, what do I do with it? He said, well, Mike, you never eat alone. You don't eat lunch alone. You don't eat dinner alone. Take prospects and clients out to lunch and dinner all the time. Mm-hmm. I expect to see a lot of expenses from you.
See, I'll reveal something here just because it fits into the pattern of what you are suggesting. As my brother-in-law at one time was the North American CEO for Hewlett Packard.
Oh, really?
So he went through the same thing. He had to basically entertain people, make them feel good and make them feel comfortable so that deals could be done.
Right. People had to feel comfortable with you and the company that you represented. I guess the thing that got me out of Telex computer products was there were too many 4 a.m. telephone calls. Mm-hmm. Okay. I remember selling Avis when they had the Wizard of Avis. And there's a whole lot of stories I could tell about that. But the one that got me out of that business with Telex was a call at 4 o'clock in the morning from the IT director of Avis saying, hey, Mike, your service engineer is asleep in the computer room on the floor behind the disk drive. And I said, well, I guess I'll be right over. And
somebody's getting sleep at 4 in the morning.
So at 4 in the morning, I go over and kick Julio in the side, take him into the cafeteria, coffee him up, and get that thing working. But I said, that was too much. And one of the guys who trained me at Telex took a job working for a company called Action Telecommunications or Action Communications, and they sold something called the Wats box.
The what?
The Wats box.
The what?
WATS.
The what?
Yeah, that's it. Who's on first?
Who's on first?
Yeah, and they were competing with AT&T, and they found a way to dramatically reduce the cost of the number of Wats lines that a company needed. And so I go in there. I really didn't know very much about it. I was a computer guy, not a telecommunications guy. Yeah. And so I'm making a prospecting call on NYU, and all of a sudden I get the company, the president of NYU on the phone. He says, yeah, come on down and talk to me about that. We have too many Wats lines here. And so I said to my boss, John, I don't know what I'm doing, John. He says, well, I'm pretty new here too. Why don't you take Jerry along with you? He's an ex-telephone company engineer. So I took Jerry along. We went down to NYU, and I came back with $1 million order.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I was a miracle man there. I said, what do I do with the check, the down payment? And my boss says, oh, go out to JFK, put it on an airplane to Tulsa, because we need it to make payroll. And then we went on.
Let me ask you this. Did you enjoy all of this?
Oh, it was fun.
It was fun. Okay. Was it something that you ever expected to do?
Absolutely not.
Okay, what did you expect to do? What was your big dream as you were growing up?
I was going to be a very successful engineer. Okay.
On a train or
I mean, electrical engineer.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I loved working with that stuff. And I still fool around with it. I still have soldering irons in the closet.
See, I wanted to be a conductor.
Okay.
But the only thing I can conduct,
a subway there in Chicago?
Yeah, I can't even conduct electricity, but anything. So that was your private dream?
That was a private dream, right?
And why didn't you go for it? What held you back? I'm fascinated by this subject because so many people think, "Oh, if I had only done this, or I have only done that."
I had too many problems going through electrical engineering school. I think I was too young when I started, and they assumed that you could learn calculus and physics at the same time, as well as overloading me with English and social studies. I mean, I remember staying up all night trying to read a book by Dos Passos because there was going to be a quiz on it the next day. And yes, I passed the quiz, but the physics and calculus lessons took a lot to be desired. And in those days, you had something called mechanical drawing, where you had to see things in 3D on a piece of paper. I found that exceptionally difficult.
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going into the second.
I don't even like to wear the glasses when I go into the theater.
Yeah. So I'm in the second year of engineering school, and I'm failing my physics course. Didn't look very bright. So I asked a couple of my fraternity brothers to tutor me so I could pass the final exam. And so they did. Some of the problems they tutored me on were on the final exam, miraculously. And so I got an A on the final exam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm looking at the posting of the grades out in front of the professor's office. And the professor walks out inside and he sees me and he says, "Mr. Roth, come inside." And he said, "I'm going to make a recommendation to you. I have no idea how you got an A on the final exam because you weren't performing like that the entire quarter."
And how did you?
It was potluck. Okay. And he says to me, "I recommend that you find another major, not electrical engineering." And so that's how I wound up. It was very shattering. I actually did a little bit of counseling over that summer school period of time and determined that I did occupational testing. Mm-hmm. And they said I should either be a funeral director or something in business. So I went into business. I went into the business school where I discovered that I could work part-time to make a few extra shekels and get A's on every course in the business school because it wasn't anything like the engineering school. My mind worked that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I was very successful in sales. I was successful at Telex. I was successful at Action Communications.
Okay. So after all of that success and traveling down a road filled with computers and wires and plugs and lights flashing and all of these things, you eventually reach a place called The Villages.
Yes.
When did you move here?
I got to The Villages in 2017.
And how did you find out about it, and why did you come?
I was in Cincinnati. I was running a successful Sandler training, primarily a sales training company. We did management training, customer service training. By the way, if that wasn't ad lib or improvisation, I don't know what was.
Yeah.
So, I had 30 or 40 years of improv in sales,
There you go.
Learning the dance.
That was the birth. That is the eggshell right there.
It was the practical example. Okay. One of the things I learned to do to train people was to break things up into chunks. The smaller the chunks, the better, because people would remember it. And we did entertainment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That means I would tell jokes. Okay. That meant that I would do magic tricks to bring out points.
Mm-hmm.
And I became very good at it. And
what did you do? You pull a sales slip out of your hat or what?
No, I mean, it was just little entertaining things, pouring water into a cup
mm-hmm.
and holding the cup over a student's head and saying, if I pass the pencil through the cup, what's going to happen? And they would cringe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would pass the pencil through one side of the cup. And I said, you have nothing to worry about because this is a self-sealing cup. It's a real system. And they felt a little better. Then I said, what's going to happen when I push it through the second side of the cup? And then they cringed again. And they said, oh, that's going to be bad. I said, okay. And what's going to happen, class, when I pull the pencil out of the cup? And they said, well, it's going to get wet. I said, nope, self-sealing cup, not a problem. And then no water came out. And then I took the top of the cup, turned it over on the guy's head, and no water came out. Okay? And what I said next in the sales training stuck in people's heads.
Now, when did you graduate to the next trick? Which was taking a box and having a person lay down on the box, close the box, and then poke them with pencils.
No.
From each side of the... No?
No.
Okay.
That's an interesting magical trick.
Yes.
Because when I was back at Action, one of the guys working with me was an amateur magician. And he said, come to my magic show, and I'll need an assistant. A lovely young lady. And I took Kay to the magic show, and I told my buddy, hey, she's going to be the blonde sitting next to me. And so he picked her out of the audience, brings her up on stage, and he had one of those boxes where you saw someone in half. Mm-hmm. So she was actually sawed in half on stage and put back together. But that's an aside.
When you discovered the Villages, did you...
Well, let me tell you how I discovered the Villages, because I was in Cincinnati.
Wait a minute. I was just going to ask you.
Okay.
How did you discover the Villages?
Well, I was a member of the Rotary Club for 20 years in Cincinnati, okay. And a lady that ran a travel agency named Pat, who was a client, retired, sold her business, and moved to the Villages. I thought I'd never see her again. She comes back and sits down. Anyway, so Pat tells me about the Villages and how they have town squares, and 3 town squares, movie theaters, happy hour, and then live bands in each one of the squares all night.
Alligators.
And they shouldn't tell me about that. And she made it sound so great. And I said, okay, I don't believe it. I'd never heard of it. So I went home, looked it up, and sure enough, there was a place called the Villages. And I told my wife about it. And she said, oh, I have a cousin who lives there. I said, oh, well, sometime we'll go visit her. So as fate would have it, the next year, Sandler, for their winter conference, they had 4 conferences a year, ran the conference in Orlando. And so I took my wife, we go to the conference in Orlando, and I think that year was the year that my wife's mom died. And so the second day of the conference, she says, I'm leaving. She left, and I left a day later. But the next year at the Sandler conference in Orlando, she says, I want to visit my cousin in the Villages. And so we came up here to the Villages, and we visited for a few days. They took us on a gasoline-powered golf cart ride from Spanish Springs to the new town square at Brownwood.
It's like an international flight, isn't it?
Yeah, 45 minutes smelling gas, 2-cylinder gasoline fuel.
Yeah, but you get 2 movies and a meal.
Yeah, we didn't do it. That didn't happen. So we took the ride, and I became convinced that I will never own a gasoline-powered golf cart. But I did become convinced that there might be something to this Villages place. So the next year, Christmas, we did a lifestyle trip, a familiarization trip. We did a second one. And
did you ride the bus?
We never rode the trolley, no.
No?
No.
Everybody should do that one time. I want to drive one of those.
You have to have a CDL. Looking for drivers, Wayne.
Yeah, but I don't want to do it for a living. I just want to drive it one time for the experience. I drove a bus in the Navy.
Oh, so you have a CDL?
I used to.
Okay. Well,
it's expired a long time ago.
Yes, we have a really good improv skit. I don't know if you've seen it, called The Villages Trolley.
Wow, there's a segue if I ever heard one, ladies and gentlemen. We get into the world of Mike Roth and improvisation. And how did that happen?
Well, David Sandler, whose picture's on the wall behind you, That's 1992 or 93 with me. And David kept saying, Sales is a Broadway play performed by a psychiatrist. And what I want you to do is take acting courses and improv courses.
Okay.
And occasionally he brought people into our training sessions who were professional actors or improvers. But I was too busy running the business and training people to take the courses. But when I got here, I joined like 6 acting acting courses and 1 improv course. I took Dean Corbett's.
And a partridge in
a pear tree, right. Anyway, in the acting courses, I decided that although I was on stage in one of Dean's little shows, I hated it. I hated memorizing lines. I had worked too hard. I remember at Burroughs, they gave us a script to memorize to sell this J800 multiplying machine. Okay. And every time you hit the X key, that meant you never knew what the number was that was going to come up. 1, 2, 3 times 4, 5, 6 is 56,088. When you hit that X key on the J800 made in France with plastic gears, it was never going to hit 56,088. But we had a quota to sell these things. So I was trying to sell them like everyone else as an adding machine and a subtracting machine. And forget about the multiplier. And then in graduate school, I was taking a course in statistics, and I learned that you needed to have a seed number for random calculations, and that actuaries would open up a book of random numbers and randomly pick one out. And so just as a lark one day, I had one of these heavy French machines under my arm. I walked into an actuarial's office, and I said, I want to speak to the head actuary. I've got a random number generator to show him. And I put this machine down on his desk, and I said, this is adding machine, subtracting machine, and the random number generator. He said, I don't believe it. I said, okay, look, you hit 1, 2, 3, and then you hit the random number key, which is an X, and 4, 5, 6, and you hit equal. Well, he did it about 10 times, and it never came up to 56,088, never came up to the same number twice. He laughingly says, I'll try it. Okay.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is the perfect example of getting your actuary together. Once you have your actuary together, life is a lot easier.
So
I think I'm channeling Steve Allen for some reason. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Steve is here.
I wish he'd get on a different channel. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so a week later, I go back to pick the machine up because no one really kept the machine as a multiplying machine. And he says to me, Mike, I want 4 more of these. So I wrote up an order for 5 machines, turned in the order, and, they paid me my commission on that. About a month later, I get a call from the guy that I sold the machines to. I'm scared shitless. He wants to return them because I was already paid my commission. He said, Mike, those machines are working great. They create seed numbers for me. They're saving me a lot of time. I don't have to pick up heavy books. I said, okay. And he says, I've just referred you to 3 of my actuary friends in town. They each want about a dozen machines. So I went out to see these guys, and I sold 3 dozen machines. I was feeling like a king, turned in the orders, went home. The next day at 8 a.m., I come in, and the branch manager is sitting on my desk, holding the orders in his hand. He said, Mike, what the heck is this? And I said, well, I sold some of those J800s. He said, Mike, you sold more J800s in one day than the branch did in the last 6 months. I said, yes, sir, that was my job. And he said, how'd you do it? They're going to return them. I said, no, I sold them as random number generators.
Yeah.
He listened to me like I'm crazy. And he held my commission back for 6 months to find out whether the machines would get returned.
If you want a real random number generator, Bally's Hotel in Las Vegas does a great job.
Yeah.
Machines are very loose. All right, now, let's get away from the business and get into the business of improv, which is what most people embrace you for.
Okay, so
here in the villages.
So I joined the only improv club, and a fellow named Brian was running it, and he was doing primarily improv games and exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a small group, maybe 20, 25 people that came every week. I enjoyed it. I think it was every other week that thing was running. And about 6 months into it, Ryan says to me, Mike, I took a job in Boston for $200,000 a year. I'm leaving the Villages, closing the Improv Club, unless you take it over. And I said, I was enjoying it. I didn't want to take it over.
Yeah.
I said, give me a day or two. I'll let me talk to a couple of my acting friends. So I wound up talking to Greg Golden. You know him?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Greg, can you help me run this improv club? I have no idea what to do. I've never been an improver as a stage performer. I improved in sales, but he says, sure. And so we took it over. And we did a couple of things. We quickly determined that we had enough talent to perhaps perform some shows with a little bit more training. Okay. We doubled the number of sessions per month from 2 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we had about 140 people on the roster. And only 20 were showing up.
Mm.
And that was very difficult to manage. So we decided to put dues on of $10 a year to get rid of anyone who wasn't serious. And it worked. We went down to a nice, manageable 20 or 25 people. We worked towards creating our first show. I think the first show we did was for the Mercedes-Benz Club, a club that I had founded. Mm. And I think you were in that one. You wrote a...
I might have been, yeah.
No, you definitely
I don't remember half the shows I've been in.
Yeah.
You know, I came here to the Villages thinking, now I got a chance to sit back, listen to some great musicians I've never heard before, maybe see some plays, maybe do a couple of plays. Then what happens? I wind up in a band. I wind up doing a play. I wind up doing all these things. And it just happens. You can't help it because this is such a vibrant area filled with talent.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why one of the reasons that people are interested in improv, they connect it not only because of the hard work and fine work that you do, keeping it together and promoting it and all that, but they also connect it with TV shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
You know,
and that was some of the inspiration of the conversion of the club.
Right.
We went to a 3-minute short form improv,
mm-hmm.
and that was perfect. Okay, and that very first show we did for the Mercedes Club, you created I asked you for a single song parody
mm-hmm.
for slow drivers,
mm-hmm.
and you came up with like a 5-song melody, which was fantastic.
Yeah, well, it was. I don't know why that happened. It just came out of me, you know. And people ask me about it all the time. They also ask me to do a couple of other stories with other shows. Still, it's nice when you can actually make a little mark and people remember you and all that. And you're certainly making memories for people with this improv show.
Yeah.
Because now, if people are interested in it, how can they keep up to date on what's happening with the improv?
Okay. Best thing is to send an email to Mike at thevillagesimprov.com. Mike at thevillagesimprov.com. When I get on that email, say you want to be added to our email list. We have about 4,000 people, 4,000 to 5,000 people on our email list, and we announce our shows. The other way is to, on a regular basis, go out to the website, thevillagesimprov.com. If you went out there today, you will find that we have a show at the Joke Joint coming up on March 15th.
Which is in
Summerfield. That's an unrestricted language show. Now,
it's an unrestricted area too. It's beautiful. They got restaurants. They got, so you can make a night of it. You go out there and you have dinner, and then you go see this.
Well, you actually they serve you dinner. They
do serve, yeah, right.
They serve. The owner is half Cuban, I think half Puerto Rican, and they serve a Cuban meal. Okay.
Yeah.
Pulled pork, pulled chicken. The cover
and
show
pulled names out of a hat.
Okay, well, the show's got a cover charge of $20 for dinner, for the show cover, dinner.
It's a lot of entertainment for $20.
2 drinks.
Yeah.
For 2 alcoholic drinks with dinner, it's $25. Mm-hmm. And I think the unlimited all you can drink ticket is $30. So it's a wonderful bargain.
Yeah.
It only seats 80 people, and you have to call them directly for a reservation. It's 352-871-0909.
Now, that brings us to the final question of this interview.
The final Jeopardy question.
The final Jeopardy question. Right. Would you like to phone a friend?
Let's see.
No, I mean, would you just
Maybe
like to
I'll
call
poll
a friend?
the audience.
You know,
Yeah, sure.
I don't care. I got time. Knowing that you have spent your life climbing the mountains of technology
Mm-hmm.
and finally winding up in the valley of improv,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that artificial intelligence could do a good improv show? And if so, what would it sound like?
That's an interesting question. If you would have asked me that question 2 years ago, and you said artificial intelligence, I would have said, no way. I don't use it.
That would have brought you back to politics, but that's
Right.
something different.
Right. And today, for this podcast, I use a lot of AI. All of my announcers are AI voices.
Mhm.
It's easier to work with them than telling me what to say. The show transcript is created by AI. The show description is created by AI. The AI creates 5 show titles, and I get to pick the one that I like the best, or best description of the show. And then the AI takes the show and divides it into chapters so that the listener can jump to a particular point.
Mhm.
And then the different AI takes the show and turns it into a YouTube video. So there's a lot of AI in it. Now, I did ask the AI to write an improv show.
You did?
Yes, about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And what it came back with...
I'm going to contact the authorities. Shouldn't be playing around with that stuff.
Yeah. The improv. So it gave me 8 or 9 scenes. Okay. 4 of them were scenes which were A, either not accomplishable by our team, or B, beyond the scope of time that we wanted to do. We wanted to keep the average scene down to 3 to 4 minutes. And we don't do long form here. If you want to see long form, go to the Sarasota Improv Festival, second weekend of July. Fantastic. 5 theaters simultaneously for 3 nights for $79. Can't beat it.
No, can't beat it.
But
And if you want real long form, go see the opera Aida. But bring a sandwich. Go ahead.
I thought that was scripted.
It's 5.5 hours long.
Yeah.
I don't care if it has a script or not.
Yeah, well, you did a long form improv with Dean Corbett, and the only thing that made that show really great was that you as the detective would break into song.
The Singing Detective. But
it floored the audience when you did it, because no one expected a singing detective.
I didn't expect it either.
But it made the show. It made the show.
I got the phone call one day. You are now a singing detective. Okay, great. Fine, we'll work it out.
So we never took the 3 or 4 scenes that the AI suggested, which were doable,
mm-hmm.
and we did add them to the show. We added them to our rehearsals to find out if they played, and some of them played and some of them didn't. But that's the story. We probably have 200 to 300 different scenes that we've done over the past 4 years. For the past 2.5 years, we have a playbook on the club member website where people can go back and learn about those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you can see, or you can hear, folks, that we have gone with the life of Mike Roth all the way from E-I-E-I-O to AI in approximately...
Only a musical guy come up with that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so, first of all, I want to thank our listeners for listening, and thank you for allowing me to probe into your life with pencils or anything else.
Good. This is a great example. I'm teaching the course in Podcasting 101.
Okay.
And I've given people a homework assignment to create a podcast of their life.
Yeah.
And now I have something to play back next Wednesday for them.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to be a part of the Scholastic stuff. I wish that you had been around when I did my podcast back in Chicago. It was an irreverent look at the music industry. And I had friends of mine, and these were the heavy hitters in Chicago. These were people that had names, and and I looked up to them and idolized them. And I put them on this show, and they don't know what's coming at them. And it was so much fun. And some of them got it immediately. It took a while for some of them to process what was going on. But I like to have fun. You have a conversation with somebody, I think it should be interesting. I think that it should be conversational.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love, because I've learned more about you in the past, what has it been?
30, 40 minutes.
30, 40 minutes listening here. Is there anything else you'd like to reflect on in your life that you haven't brought up?
Well, I did a podcast myself in Cincinnati between 2014 and 17.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I had done radio commercials. Originally, I did one or two with the announcer from the studio, from the radio station. And I said, I could do better than he can.
There you go.
And I would go into the studio and record 5 spots. Okay. And then I would watch this engineer named Rob, who I'm still in touch with.
I used to be in that band years ago.
Rob?
No, the 5 spots.
5 spots. Okay.
They were great.
And I was advertising on this guy's show, Gordon Liddy.
Oh, that is Gordon Liddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm staring at it and staring at him, trying to figure out 2 things. Who is that gentleman, and why is the frame crooked?
Well,
Do you live on a hill or something, or what?
Well, he was a crooked guy. But he was criminally insane.
Oh.
But he had a listenership, and my commercials were very successful, but they were expensive. So what I decided to do was try this podcast, and I interviewed company owners in Cincinnati that I thought had companies that I would like to do business with as a sales training company. And damn it, if in the first 3 months it wasn't cash profitable. And I stopped doing the radio and instead put some of the radio commercials into the podcast. And I asked tough questions of owners and managers. And that podcast got about 90,000 listens. It still gets 5 or 10 listens a week. I can't believe it. But and I haven't done anything to it since 2017 when I sold my business.
Well, folks, this is your temporary interviewer, Wayne Richards. I'm going to turn back the listenership to Captain Roth, and he will be set sailing for future podcasts right here on the, what network is this?
But this is on Buzzsprout or the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida network.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters, Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, and major supporter Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024, all rights reserved.